We'll call to order the Planning Commission regular meeting for April 20th, 2023. I can ask the clerk to do roll call.
Sure. Anderson,
Here.
Vegetarian,
Edric, yes, here.
great, thank you. Broker,
Here.
Gardner,
Here.
Gahn,
Here.
Lachey,
Here.
and me.
Here.
That's okay.
Full house.
CJ,
Welcome,
that's
everyone.
fine.
Hello. In your packet in front of you, in the packet in front of you is the agenda for this evening. Everyone had an opportunity to review it. If so, there'd be a motion for approval.
So moved.
Support. Moved by Gant, support by Lachey. There's a voice vote. All those in favor? Yes.
Yes.
Aye. Opposed? None. Carries. Also in the packets that were furnished for each of us was the minutes from our March 16th, 2023 meeting, and they begin in the packet on page 3. Did everyone have an opportunity to review? Do we have any comments in regards to changes necessary for the meeting minutes? Seeing none, do we have a motion for approval of the minutes?
Yes, with thank you to the clerk for good note taking. I move that we approve the minutes.
Second. By Anderson, second by Gardner. This is voice vote. All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Aye. Opposed? None. Minutes are approved. Next is our first public comment section. This is public comments related to anything that's on the agenda for this evening. If you do want to speak, you would come to the podium, or if you're online, you just raise your hand, keep the comments to 3 minutes. Please be aware that there is an item that's on the new business, which is the 245 Spear Street, which will require its own public hearing, which would also have a public comment session. But anyone would be welcome to speak on anything that's on the agenda item. Do we have anyone in the room at this time that would like to speak on any agenda item? Online, Sarah, I don't see anyone. Do you see anything?
There, I don't know where Jurassic went, he'll probably be back in a minute. He was.
And if there is no public comments, we will close out this first public comment session. Next item on the agenda is the old business. The item underneath the old business is a short-term rental task force, and we really want to just kind of give a verbal update of what has happened since the last meeting. And I believe, Russ, you're going to kick it off, and then Holly or.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm actually going to turn it over to you. Have the privilege of having the short-term rental task force chair on your planning commission. And I think she's well positioned to provide you with an update.
Fantastic. Thanks. Russ.
Thanks. Well, we're making good progress. We met, actually Ryan and I met earlier today with our McKenna team and to talk sort of the overall framework for how we see the task force working, and then discussing the agenda for the first meeting on May 4th. Again, we think this is a really sharp team, good questions, very collaborative. They're totally stoked to be working on this, which is good. So we're getting them, and when I say we, I mean Ryan, is getting them a lot of data so that they can start, getting the lay of the land from the numbers perspective. Hopefully we'll at least be able to provide some of that information at the first meeting. And really a lot of the focus of that meeting will be getting people grounded on, how our meetings will work and sort of what to expect over the coming months. But I think we're really well positioned. Ryan, anything to add to that?
No, I think that's well. Yeah, the McKenna team's excited to get started and work with the city of Saugatuck. Yeah, that first meeting will be a lot of housekeeping, but also kind of discussing similar to what you're doing tonight with waterfront development, kind of looking at what's that plan over the next several months. What does that timeline look like? And start looking at initially what needs to be gathered to that, especially data wise, to make some informed decisions. I think since your last meeting, the actual task force was actually appointed.
That's what I was going to
Yeah, so
Kind
I
of,
don't know if any of you have questions on that, but the task force members are all appointed now by city council. If you want to touch on that.
Yeah, I had forgotten. It's
I know.
been
it's
a
kinda
month.
like they-
Yeah.
covered
So
that.
yeah, everybody's appointed. I've reached out to them individually to encourage them to reach out if they have questions beforehand. I've talked with one of the members this morning just to, get his perspective and see if he had any questions, have another meeting tomorrow. So I think people are really excited and engaged, and I think everybody understands this is hard work ahead of us, but work that we're up to. So, and the same with the McKenna team. And actually what was great about the excitement for working with Saugatuck is their whole firm is excited about it. So as they need to draw on resources throughout the state, I think people will be eager to dive in. So
I think it's good.
Are all of the members who were appointed by council on the team? There's been no turnover or anything?
nope,
Great.
yeah.
Yeah, so far. And I was just gonna add that, from anybody who has listened to the council meetings or some of the workshops where it was being discussed, there was candidates that you had questioned, about whether they were citizens or not citizens, or some of the individuals. And I know that I had ended up speaking with a number of them, as well as I believe Mayor Dean did, and just trying to explain that what we really were putting together was that what we kind of called the team. And just like as you build as a coach would build a team, you were trying to look for what the strengths were that each person brought and how they would possibly give the representation of what they could bring into the group from the community. And we felt very comfortable, but then we also did reach out to the few of them that were named, in the meetings, as examples of those that were not, whether it was actually a realtor or a resident, to make certain that they were comfortable. And I was very pleased that they were still very excited, and they realized that they may be watched a little more closely. And then the ones who actually, were very strong candidates have reached out and said, I plan, I think, to discuss this with Chair Anderson, to reach out to them directly as we are putting things together to try to make certain that they are participating. I think I'm pretty certain that they will, because it's more than just the 9-member task force. But I think that not only is it a strong group and everybody is in place, but we've also, I think, now have, citywide support for the task at hand and then the players we have in place.
Yeah, and one thing I'm glad you brought that up, we're really trying to stress is, it's 9 people. And so obviously that's not the universe of Saugatuck, that if people feel like a group is underrepresented or their point of view is underrepresented, really encouraging people to reach out to us. And if we need to carve out some time in our meetings to, make sure that that voice is heard. I mean, this is really about listening first and foremost, so that we can learn and understand and move this forward. So I mean, that would be something I personally will want to stress.
Yeah, and I think as we're putting together in that first meeting, you want to try to highlight that part of the goal would be for each member, almost when they come together, like when we have at the end, if anybody has any comments to make, who do they touch base with, what lunches
Yeah.
do they have, or information that they're bringing to the table besides what they're seeing just themselves.
Chairman Mans, thank you very much. Again, appreciate all the effort that's gone into this, and very excited about this process. I don't know what the future looks like on this. It's unwritten, but it's exciting to go into it. And I do want to thank Chairman Mans. He kind of alluded to it. I had 2 candidates that did not get selected for the task force that were disappointed in that decision. And it's kind of like 20 people applying for 2 jobs, right? 18 people are going to be disappointed. And I really appreciate Chairman Mans being open to calling these individuals and talking them through the process. And my goal is to say, did you feel like you were treated fairly? And the answer to that question was yes. That's good, because that means that people feel as though they were actually listened to. And again, they understand these are adults, and we've all been through, we've gotten rejected before. At least I know I have. And I just appreciate the effort to make that, you and Mayor Dean, to make sure that people feel as though they were treated and, dealt with fairly. 2 is that something that's interesting, because as I stopped to talk with people on the street, this task force and this effort is top of mind for some folks. And I happened to talk to a local realtor on my bike ride tonight. And it was interesting because 2 things that were said to me. One was that he has heard that there has been discussion regarding South Haven's going to be the model that we're going to be looking at. And I said, where'd you hear that? And he didn't really have any detail on that. And I said, I don't think there's any model that's being looked at. The first thing that's going to be done from my perspective, and I will keep saying it, is identify what the problem is. Focus on problem identification, and Commissioner Anderson mentioned that the first thing is to really kind of get the numbers, right? Figure out exactly what the playing field looks like, and then identify what the problem is. Don't talk about a solution
Absolutely.
before you really talk about the problem. So again, I've been talking about this, I'll say it again, but that's really the first effort in projects I've been on like this, is that, okay, what exactly are we trying to solve?
Yeah, and if I could, Mr. Chair, I'll touch on that, and just to make sure the air is very, very clear. The process that you just described is the exact process that's occurring. There's been no discussion about any South Haven model. The only time I've talked with South Haven about short-term rentals was recently when they asked for some of our data, because they're doing an evaluation themselves, but I didn't discuss with them what they have going on in that regard. So that's just want to make sure that's very clear out there. Another thing I want to make sure the planning commission is aware of is, so similar to your meetings, we send you a packet, but we also send it out to the community, post it on our website, have all of you as members on our website. The same process will be followed for our short-term rental task force. I've talked with the clerk, and they're going to create a separate page for that.
Right.
So,
Excellent.
I think it is excellent. And I do think,
Sure. So it's May 4th. Is there a time, and when will that
Yes, that's what I was
notification
getting
go
ready.
out?
that's why I wanted to say the meeting will be May 4th, 3 to 5 PM here at City Hall.
We
And-
send those out 18 hours. They have to be out 18 hours.
Good.
And that will have like an agenda and that.
it'll be
And
up for that for sure.
just in case there was anyone, since Commissioner Gardner did bring it up, regarding the South Haven, there was I think some of us had seen a report that was done in regards to South Haven. It was more of an economic study. And it was an example of what we may, be looking for from whoever our consultant is. Now we know it would be McKenna. I know at one point it was discussed, should it be in a packet? And we kind of felt, I think, and Russ and the team was correct in being able to say that, no, we didn't put it in the packet, because then it could be more perceived that that's what we were trying to follow. But it is, but those reports are out there, and you could find it online, and it's interesting information, just like the one that we did see like on Sutton Bay. And I've read probably 12 others in the last month. But no, it's not going to be following anyone in particular. It's definitely targeted towards what's best for Sagatuck. And I'm excited for it too. And so, yeah, another meeting, another 2 meetings each month. Here we go. With that, we can move on to new business. Now, the first item of new business involves one of our commissioners. So I'm going to ask
Yeah.
Russ if he'd like to speak first.
Yeah, Chairman Mance, thank you very much. This is an application for my homestead property. We live there. This home has been my family for 60+ years, 245 Spear Street. So I will be recusing myself from the discussion. I will be going out and sitting in the audience, and my wife Jennifer's here to, I'll be answering questions if asked during the actual presentation itself, but appreciate your consideration of our application.
Great, and we appreciate the
If I could, Mr.
opportunity.
Chair,
And
yeah,
If we can, I was going to ask.
yeah, just
I should
just
say Russ. I said Russ 3 times now, haven't I?
just just to make sure everyone's clear on the bylaws and kind of how we handle the situation. Mr. Gardner's declared his conflict related to, in this case, probably a direct financial interest by being the homeowner and an applicant. In this case, your bylaw states no member of the commission shall participate in the hearing or decision of the commission upon any zoning matter other than the preparation and enactment of an overall or comprehensive plan or zoning ordinance, which is not the case here. So in this case, you wouldn't be able to necessarily answer questions during the public hearing, but if there's something before the public hearing is open that you wish to present before the public hearing is open, you would have that opportunity to discuss that with our city attorney. I just want to make it clear that Mr. Gardner won't be able to actually answer any direct questions during the public hearing itself.
But we will be able to direct questions too.
His representative, his wife, yep.
Yep. Yes, it is.
No more pay.
So item A is the 245 Spear Street, the special land use request for a rented auxiliary dwelling unit and site plan review. Now, do we want to open up the public hearing before we discuss anything in regards to it, correct? Yep. Yeah. So that does require a public hearing, so we will call to order the public hearing at, was it 7:15? The summary, please, by Ryan, the zoning administrator.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. The applicant has applied for a special land use approval to rent an existing accessory dwelling unit at 245 Spear Street. By the way of background, the Historic District Commission actually approved a kind of a pole barn or garage renovation and conversion of the 768 square foot building on September 3rd of 2020. The building was approved as an accessory dwelling unit administratively. And initially, the applicant was intending for the accessory dwelling to be used by family, and then has since then expressed a wish to actually manage the accessory dwelling unit as a rental. The special land use ordinance or special land use requirements for a rented accessory dwelling unit requires that a rented accessory dwelling unit conform to all sections of provisions of an accessory dwelling unit in your ordinance. And then there's several other requirements related to general site plan review and general special land use conditions that have to be met as well. So an analysis and comments related to those requirements has been provided in your packet for your review. One item of note that we flagged as a concern is related to the size. So the accessory structure itself is indicated 768 square foot. The applicant in his application has indicated that he wishes to have a 2-bedroom accessory dwelling unit. The zoning ordinance has a maximum size requirement of 600 square foot or 30% of the floor area of the home, and it's the lesser of those two. So was it real clear in the particular application materials, the size of the home to determine whether or not, if it's essentially over 1,800 square foot, then 600 is going to be the max. If it's less than that, then we'll have to take 30% of that square footage to determine what's the maximum size of the accessory dwelling unit. A few potential options that the planning commission, could discuss, or the applicant could discuss as far as kind of showing compliance with that square footage requirement could involve certainly going to the zoning board of appeals to file for a variance to have a higher amount of square footage in the accessory dwelling unit. That would be an option that they would have. They could request a zoning ordinance text amendment to change the size requirements in the zoning ordinance. Or perhaps planning commission would be willing to allow the applicant to demonstrate in some way that they've kind of closed off a section of the accessory structure so that the portion used for actually dwelling unit purposes is actually, at 600 square feet or a lesser amount if it needs to be a lesser amount. So those are all options for the planning commission to discuss this evening. Otherwise, happy to answer questions as you deliberate.
Great. Thank you, Ryan. I appreciate all the work you put into giving us all this information as to where it complies and where we might have issues currently. At this time, I would ask if we could have the presentation by the applicant.
Hi, Jen Race, 245 Spear Street, Russ Gardner's wife. I don't exactly know what you mean by presentation, but maybe I can just speak to this a little bit if that would be helpful. First of all, thank you for volunteering. When Commissioner Mans was talking about the whole short-term rental, he talked very much as a volunteer, and I'm keenly aware of how much time this takes for all of you. So thank you. This was not on my vision to be in front of the Planning Commission board to ask for this. Our intent was to build this ADU for my father, who turned 80 last fall, and we asked for him to move up from Chicago to live with us. It is also my end goal to get him in the ADU. So this is an interim step for us. We created this vision and we built and we did all of this during COVID. And for those who bought anything during COVID, you can understand that the budget and the cost quickly went not to what we had budgeted for. So we're very much seeing this as a short-term step. This is not our get rich quick scheme. I have no interest in doing long-term rental at all. This is frankly just a way for us to stay on the right side of a budget line and continue to be in this home and be a part of this community.
Can we ask the applicant questions now
Oh,
before
sorry,
public
can I
comment?
add one other thing? Sorry, I did make a note about this. You said the 2-bedroom ADU. So Russ and I were scrambling. We actually don't know what the square footage is of our prime home, so I can't do the math really quickly on the 30%. But we're not totally sure we would run it as a 2-bedroom, given that studio area. I just want to put that caveat in there, that we never have like listed it to say it would be a 2-bedroom, just so you know. There's flexibility around that original studio area that you noted.
Is questions appropriate? I don't know.
Yep.
Can we ask those before we have any of the public comments? But if we can, I guess one of the questions, does the unit itself look like what it was on the original site plan as far as that second, what you would potentially be the second bedroom, kind of just being an open space currently?
Slight on that schematic. There's been a slight change. The mechanical room, if you look at it on the plat, the mechanical room that is on.
Yeah, I'll pull it up.
Room that's currently on the west side.
Right, that's on
That's
page
been-
27. That's on page 27 of your packets for any of our commission members.
That's been flipped over to everything is the same that you see right here, except for the mechanical room on the front that's on the west side of the building. That's been flipped over to the east side, and we expanded the bath to have a small shower. Those are the only differences on this.
So there's an increased square footage of this ADU now.
No, there's actually less. Sorry,
If you've expanded to add a shower,
sorry, I used the wrong word. We tucked the shower into the bathroom.
This bathroom, right?
Yes.
okay,
The bathroom that was there, do you see where the original slop sink was that had the big counter? That's just been retooled slightly, so now. The toilet's here,
Mhm.
the sink's here, and the shower's here, and this
got
is
it.
here.
I understand. Thank you. I'm a little confused by your comments moments ago. It's perfectly possible it's me. On the one hand, you said you still intend to move your father into this unit, is that correct?
That's eventually, yes.
Okay. Okay, eventually. So until some unspecified time, you will be renting this out in order to recoup your building costs of it, or?
That is what we were talking about, yes.
Okay.
Do you have an I mean, that's one of the questions, I guess, regarding the home. An approximation of what their square footage of the house is. I know it's been in the family for, 100 years, but
Yeah. Russ,
Yeah, so
2,400 square feet, and yeah, so 2,400, that's what we think it is.
But you don't have anything that documents the size of it.
Well, no, we reached out to a couple people and we tried to look for some tax records on our square footage. We actually lifted up our house in 2003, between 2003 and 2004. We lifted up our house, it was actually up on the blocks, because we had to redo the entire foundation. So, and we redid the basement at that time. So we were looking for the tax documents from that time period for the square footage and we couldn't find them. But we do estimate it at around 2,200 square feet.
2,200.
It's an estimate. of-
No, I'm sorry. I heard you say 2,400. Sorry.
have you and Mr. Gardner discussed the options that were laid out of either asking for a variance or zoning changes?
Yeah, we did. we didn't have any finite discussions about it because we obviously needed this to occur first.
Right.
So we wanted to hear what the thoughts were and where our flexibility was and how we had to work with it. So we discussed quite a few things around the door, the studio area, which is what we call the front area. We talked about a couple of things, but we didn't come to any finite conclusions.
Yeah, because for myself, and I'm, obviously any other commission member can speak. When we are looking at, I know it was an existing building and it was changed, without the idea of it becoming, part of a rental. But, we clearly state that it's 30%, the lesser of 30% of primary square footage or 600 feet. And, if your home is 2,200, then the lesser is going to be the 600. But at 748 square feet, it's over the 600. So it makes it very challenging for us to be able to figure out a way to try to, at least for me, to be able to say that I can approve it unless there's a way I can figure out, which is I kind of discussed in here, of how we can get the rental portion to be 600 square feet or less. And I know there was a discussion about potentially taking that storage area. And I have to kind of look at this and think, well, with any applicant that would come in front of us, how do I regulate if somebody says they're going to lock it off? So I don't know, do you have any type of response or thoughts regarding that? How they,
Can I ask a question? Is it livable square feet and is it livable square feet in the house or is it just pure square feet?
Yep, so there's a
well, it would
definition of-
be, I think it's actually square footage, but again, assuming that you had 2,200 square feet, whether you had, as long as you have 1,800 or more, 30% is going to basically put you at the 1,880, something like that, would put you at the 600. And it's the lesser of the 30% or the 600. So if you're at 1,900 or above in square footage, then the lesser is going to be the 600. So our, the square footage plays in, because if you said your house is only 1,500 square feet, then we'd be looking at a limitation of 30% of 1,500, which would be, approximately 400 and some. But, if we can kind of somehow have an understanding that the square footage is greater than, the
I'm just trying to understand, and we talked a little bit and I got a little bit of clearing, but I wanted to talk about it a little more. The ADU was approved. It's an approved ADU.
correct.
Our scope here is just, is it allowed to be rented? But within that approval, we have to look at it, does it meet the ADU requirements? So that's how it comes back into
Right,
play.
because historically it was approved, was it 2 years ago, 3 years ago? For them to be able to build it as an ADU,
At the size it
but
is.
if they want to make it as a special, it requires a special land use if you want to make an ADU a rental.
Yeah,
And now that's where you have to now look at it and say, does it meet the rules of a special land use for a rental of an ADU?
so no matter what, it's gonna leave here being an ADU, whether it's a rental ADU, special land use is
Correct.
what we're trying to decide. Okay.
Correct. And the fact that I believe, at least from what I've seen, that there was some like other areas where it was non-compliant, like on some of the zoning, but because it was an existing building, they were able, because they weren't changing the footprint of the original, barn that was on it. So it's kind of unique that it's already an approved ADU, but, how do we work around the fact that our ordinances say that, 30%, lesser of 30% of the primary or 600 feet, when we've got a ADU that's now built at, it's recorded as
To answer your
758.
question, if I may, you asked whether it's total floor square footage or livable. I'll be happy to answer that for you. Our ordinance provides that it shall not exceed the lesser of 30% of the gross floor area. Gross floor area is defined as the sum of all horizontal areas of all floors of a building or buildings measured from the outside dimensions of the outside face of the outside wall. Unenclosed and uncovered porches, courtyards, or patios shall not be considered as part of the gross area except where they are utilized for commercial purposes such as outdoor sale of merchandise. So
Basically
whether it's
corner to
livable or
corner.
not, as I read this.
Right.
Your entire interior square footage of your house is what is purpose for the calculation.
Okay,
And that's why I thought that if you had the foundation work done, you would know how wide, what the dimensions of the foundation was, and that would give you kind of like
Yeah, our actual plat survey is in the presentation. It's really hard to read the numbers on what the footprint is, and the footprint of our house is that. So the upstairs, we're in a tiny little dormer house, so the upstairs is fit for hobbits and, but it does have
Would count.
floor to floor. And I do apologize. I guess most people probably do know their square footage of their house. I guess maybe because we've never sold it. We don't know what it is.
and again, even if, and like you said, I guess you can kind of go by that plot plan, and looking at what the foundation is, and it is, one level or two. I would expect in most situations that if you knew that it was going to be one of the potential issues, that we would come in knowing what the square footage is, and that would have been appreciated. But again, now even if I'm trying to make the assumption that the gross square footage is greater than the 1900, which would then put us at the ability to say, 1950, that 600, they said still leaves us with, how would you propose
Yeah, so.
to
so
address
these are
that,
the-
to give us something that we would potentially be able to look and give you an approval with condition, because, currently it'd be very obvious that it doesn't meet, that standard.
So it sounds like we have two things. We either go back and then ask for a variance for the percentage, or we think about how we can reduce the space. And we did think about one way to reduce the space, which is to block off that front area, which is the studio. And to your question, Commissioner Mans, the way to block it off is to wall it off.
Yeah, Mr.
Or
Chair, I just,
racket.
yeah,
That's that.
I'm good.
Would be to somehow delineate a strong area between the back south area and the front north area, so that the front studio office was its own entity. I don't want to say the wrong word, but like its
Right.
own space, and the other space was the rentable space.
Do we have other questions for the applicant before we open up public comments?
Can I make another comment? Commissioner Lachey, I just want to be really clear. I have an 80-year-old father who's going up and down the steps to our basement right now. That's where he is in our,
Oh, he's living with you now.
yeah,
I thought he
sorry.
was still in Chicago.
No. My father, Charlie Reese, he lives with us currently. He moved up here with us in 2020, or he moved up with me rather, and our daughter from Chicago. He lives with us right now, and he has basements to traverse up and down into the basement where he's currently. So when I do say this is not my long-term goal, this is also a potential rental that's literally in our backyard. We're blessed to have such a huge space, but this is not something we want long-term. And actually, for my dad's long-term health and safety, he needs to be in a flat. So this is not in forever. This is short-term. Probably shouldn't use that word, but this is a momentary blips in 245 Spear Street history.
And we will, thank you. If there's any questions.
I have a question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm
I'm
it's
just asking.
okay. And it's probably because I'm not very good at reading plans. So currently the entrance into this unit is off of the patio. Where is the front door?
There's actually two egresses. There's a path, like you said, there's a door here on this patio,
Right.
the west, and then this door right here where it says studio office, that's also an entry.
So if you were to block off the studio office, it would still be accessible
It would
from
be.
the outside
Yes.
to your family.
Yes, exactly.
but not accessible to whoever was occupying,
No.
unless
no.
it was your dad.
No, no.
Okay.
If that area would be walled off or locked somehow, it would not, there would be no accessibility to that office except by that door.
Okay. Thank you.
That raises a question, if I may. Do you anticipate, let's say you were to wall off the door, you created the office and studio as a separate space and you walled it off. It's got a bedroom and a bath. Do you anticipate moving your father into the studio space and renting out the rest of the unit?
No. No.
And in that case, Mr. Lachey, it wouldn't be allowable. Only one accessory dwelling unit is permitted on any lot. So that other space wouldn't be able to be used as I don't know what they mean by studio if they're, but office space is one thing. Using it as some sort of living space wouldn't be allowed because they already would have it.
What's your dad?
So even if it's your dad, so, yeah.
Even though it is
So-
my dad and we've been living very closely for 3 years, there is no kitchen accessibility and it would be kind of tight. That's not the worst idea, but no, he would not be moving out there.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, then, seeing no further questions for the applicant, again, we will thank you. And
Thanks,
at
Jen.
this time, we will open up for public comment. If you are looking to make a comment, we'd ask that you identify yourself with your name and your address. Your comments should be addressed, to the chair, myself, and limit your comments to 3 minutes. Is there anyone in the room that would like to have public comments in regards to 245? That's what I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I would defer to our city attorney on that. I mean, whether or not that's participation in the public hearing.
Can we,
It'd be my opinion that he could participate during public comment like any member of the public, but subject to the same rules and restrictions that you would give members of the public.
So yes.
so the answer is yes, the 3 minutes.
Yeah, right, yeah. Yep, I think our city attorney, yep, feels so, yep.
Russ Kerner, 245 Spear Street. Thank you. Just real quickly, just to kind of reinforce what was said by Jen. The house itself, the principal residence is in excess of 1,900 feet. Pretty confident in that, whether it's 2,200, 2,400, not exactly sure. We'll nail that number down. Two is that the discussion regarding that office space up front, we are completely flexible to have that door locked, so it cannot be used by people that would rent the back. And that space could easily be used for other purposes for my father-in-law because he's an artist, he does stained glass and does a lot of really cool stuff. Could be very easily used space. As a matter of fact, that was the idea for him to have space where he could work in his, like a studio. So I just want to add those 2 comments. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Gordon. Any individual online that would like to speak as part of the public comments? I do not see anyone. If no one else online or in the room, then we will close public comments.
Yeah, and Mr. Chair, just if I could, just for your record, I did share with the planning commission earlier this week, an email from John Sereno at 234 Spear Street.
Yes. I forgot.
That expressed that he supported the accessory dwelling unit, whether the applicant decides to limit the accessory dwelling unit to 600 square feet code maximum or seeks an exception to allow it to be the full 768 square foot to be permitted as a rental. Stated that the Gardners are exemplary residents of Saugatuck. Talked about their family history in town, thoughtful management of their property and dedication to the community. So with all of our discussions about rental properties, changing the landscape of the town, an accessory dwelling unit that provides rental income to full-time residents is a very important part of the solution. That allows residents to manage the escalating cost of ownership as well as the cost of compliance with the historic district regulations that apply in Spear Street. And that if the accessory dwelling unit rental income is enough to help residents remain in town, invest in their property, we should do all we can to support that option.
I appreciate you reading that. Good. Should have made reference to that because that was a very supportive letter. Speaking very much highly of the Gardners and the history of that property. So with the public comments closed, I guess now we just have the commission deliberation on thoughts in regards to how best to proceed.
If I may, I've got a couple of questions for our zoning administrator. Procedurally first, if there were to be a vote and the vote was no or not approval, I know some of the other things require a year before they can come back. Do you know offhand, not offhand, do you know when the applicants could apply again?
I'd have to take a look at that and see if there's some sort of requirement to have a, substantial change in plans, or if it's just a period of time, and you may have something in your bylaws about that as well.
Because I recall with site plan review, I believe that if there actually is a vote taken, if it's not withdrawn, they have to wait a whole year.
So your bylaws states that a case that has been decided adversely to the petitioner may not again be placed on the agenda for consideration within 12 months after the date of the decision. That's a piece in your bylaws. I'd have to, see what's in the actual zoning ordinance, and then we'd have to reconcile if there's any conflict between the two.
And I'm not certain, but I thought I saw someplace in there that if the procedure was that they went forward and got a variance, which would then allow it to come back, it would then be almost like a new.
I think if they get a variance, they don't have to come to us at all.
The
Well-
variance would be
Land use.
for this, we still have to have a special land use
Oh,
for the
okay.
rental license, but it would be viewed almost in my way I interpreted it. And again, sometimes I interpret things differently, but I interpreted it that it would be able to come back because it would now be, I guess, almost like revised because of the variance approval if it was given, but
Right, yeah.
I'm not certain of that.
Yeah, if the applicant were to say, okay, I'm gonna withdraw, I'm gonna go seek a variance and then bring this back to you if I'm granted a variance, and then at that point, if the ZBA were to grant the variance, the square footage wouldn't be an issue, but you would still be evaluating all the other factors to make sure that they're compliant. You do have an option to, if you feel like you need more information from the applicant, your bylaws state that you may postpone the hearing when it, in your judgment, the petitioner has not provided sufficient evidence to make a determination. So you could say, hey, we list out whatever you're looking for and come back for another meeting. That's an option that you have as well.
And we could also approve it with conditional on getting a variance or locking off the studio. That's my understanding of the memo, but is that correct, Ryan?
Yeah, certainly if your condition, if the applicant was offering to say, hey, yes, our plan is to block this off, and the planning commission were to say, yeah, we're agreeable to allowing that to be a viable option and made that a condition. Perhaps having some sort of, revised site plan to also prove that's so it's clear that's what was done. That's an option. I think whether or not you could conditionally approve it with the condition being that it's approved that they're granted a variance, that would be something I would kick over to our city attorney to give his thoughts on that.
So I've been to a few short-term rentals. Regularly, there's an owner's locked room or owner's storage area or area blocked off. And those aren't walls that are put up. They're just locks and usually a label of some sort.
But are they included in the original square footage of the
That's-
ADU?
I don't know.
In
those
most
details.
situations, the answer is yes, you have just locked off a portion of it
Well,
for your own use.
It had to be in the original to get their approval to build, unless there was an error
Right,
made.
right.
Yeah, and that's a
Yeah.
question that I have, Ryan, is another question is, what happened in 2020? I'm really struggling to reconcile this. Is the thinking that a mistake was made or there's a differing view now of what compliance means now in 2023 versus 2020 when this was approved? Because I guess I'll add a comment to that question. If that's what happened, then I have some concerns about what appears to be us changing course on what we think compliance is.
So when I looked at the history there, when the Historic District Commission looked at it, granted, they're not subject to the zoning piece, and they're just reviewing from a historic district perspective, but on the zoning administrator's Historic District Commission memo to the Historic District Commission, it was noted that 600 square foot was the max, and that the applicant, would have to use, a portion of the accessory dwelling unit for, storage or some other purpose besides actually dwelling unit purposes. There was then later a zoning permit application from the applicants. Their project description was to convert the existing pool structure into a habitable studio space. Said that would be one bath, 1.5. One bed, 1.5 bath studio apartment. And then the way the zoning administrator described the work description on that was to convert that was approved to convert the existing barn to livable space as described in the historic district application. So there's not any particular, so I can't tell clearly,
So, but in 2020, it was already a garage, so it was already 720 or whatever
Correct.
the greater number. It was
Yep.
just going from a garage to an ADU that brought in that 600-foot requirement.
correct. So it would be no different that, if somebody were to build an accessory dwelling unit above a garage that, the structure itself may be over 600 square foot. But the living portion, the accessory dwelling unit portion has a
Sure.
maximum gross floor area.
Okay.
I see. So the best we can piece together was that the prior zoning administrator viewed the accessory dwelling unit square footage as excluding the studio, hence it was in compliance and she issued the permit.
That could be a fair reading, yeah.
And then because of it being brought up now before us as a rental, you go back to the special land use. And, then the 600 comes up, once again.
Right. And in this case, the applicant is indicated in their application, they want a 2-bedroom accessory dwelling unit. Well, in this case, the only way to have 2 bedrooms would be use the studio as a bedroom. So that's kind of what was like.
Right. So the application itself, if you go through it, it lists a 2-bedroom, 2-bath was the intention. And again, the only way Ryan was just saying that I could see that you get a 2-bedroom, 2-bath would be if you had the full unit, which kind of, so the application and the discussion of locking that storage space off don't match.
The application we're currently looking at.
Right, the application has been filed for a 2-bedroom, 2-bath.
But the approach that we're talking about would be consistent with what was decided in 2020, and we could approve that.
But in 2020, they weren't looking at it as a rental.
Well, I will just make a comment that I would be comfortable approving this with the studio being locked off. That seems like a completely reasonable approach, given that the city already approved this being built in 2020. I think it's a bit, it feels a bit unfair to reverse course.
Yeah, the only thing that worries me is, especially with all the focus we've been having on short-term rentals and compliance and it just, I mean, especially with the application as it is right now, we don't really know what the square feet is. We don't have a concrete plan for how they would get it to the square feet it needs to be. It feels like an incomplete submission to us. And I'm reluctant to be put into a position where people say, WTF, why did you approve something that wasn't strict by the book? Especially given that one of the applicants is a member of both council and the planning commission. I hate doing anything that would make us appear like we were cutting or giving them a pass that we might not give everybody. Which isn't to say it couldn't get to a point, but to not have basic information like what is the square footage and what is the plan and what does it look like for how you would cut that off, and on your application, if it's not going to be 2-bedroom, to have it listed as 1-bedroom, that would make me feel buttoned up and say, okay, that would be, I could get behind that, but it has been surprising to me just in the couple of weeks of short-term rentals, the stuff people bring up, and it's like, why'd you do that? Well, why did this person qualify? Because technically they're XYZ. And the more we, especially around rentals, we can minimize it. And I'm one voice. So I can appreciate how you get to where you are.
Do we know what the square footage is with that blocked off? Of the floor area of the ADU
Not.
minus the studio and the bathroom and the
No.
mechanicals? Okay.
So that's where,
Yeah.
again, I think, go ahead.
Yeah, so I really sort of feel the same way. We got to know what it is so we can block out this. So we know that the 600 is what we're shooting towards. And then what is it that this floor area is?
Right.
Exactly.
And-
I'm supportive of Holly's point.
I am very supportive of Holly's, and I think, when I look at it with knowing that it is, an applicant who's a citizen of, we want to look at it and try to figure out how can you make something like this work? But then at the same time, I think, we have to try to look and say, is it something that we feel confident that everything was in alignment, that we would be able to say, yes, this is why, it was approved, and that it's not any type of relationship or, special treatment for someone who is applying, who's on the commission or the council, and that makes it somewhat challenging. So I agree with what
We've put up,
Commissioner Anderson was
we
saying.
put up other decisions waiting for other
Correct.
data rather than having to do a rejection. We can
Right.
say incomplete. and-
Yeah,
And that's what I think is, because, again, if I was summarizing, we don't know the square footage, of the home to verify that the 600 is the lesser. So I think that, in my opinion, that becomes very important to know, are we talking about the needing to get it down to 600 feet, or is it 30% of something, less than, which would make it less than the 600? If it is, if the primary is greater than, the 1900 and something that would allow us to have 600 as the lesser. If you put a block off or a wall, does that remaining portion equal 600 feet or less? I don't know, but there's no dimensions on this. And then if that was going to be, my suggestion at least would be that the application be revised to say a 1-bedroom, 1-bath rental unit, not a 2-bedroom, 2-bath. Because again, I think that we really need to make certain that in this situation, like with all, but
yeah,
that
I
we
I would say in
definitely,
any situation.
yeah, with any situation, that it's all, in, alignment, or we at least have, some type of data. And we have asked for similar ones in the past to go back and, provide a revised site plan or revised data. And so that's kind of, a lot of times where my thoughts are.
Mr. Chair, if that's it seems like that's where we're headed. I have two additional comments that may need clarification by the applicant. One is with respect to the parking spaces. I know our zoning administrator has said there seems to be plenty of driveway space. But the fact that that driveway may hold potentially 4 cars, I would suspect that there should be a dedicated spot that can be egress directly from the street that is provided for this potential ADU. I think one of the concerns I hear from people is about the lack of parking in our city. And so to have somebody renting this ADU and parking on the street would be just an additional burden, which is specifically not allowed under our provision. And secondly, I believe that there should not be a burden on anybody with respect to the city administration to monitor whether the egress between the main unit, I'll call it, and the studio office space is continuing to be available by a lock. I would suggest that it be walled off so that anybody anywhere would be confident that it is a permanent for the term of the rental ADU, that it be a permanent division between the 1-bedroom, 1-bath and the studio office and bath versus just a locked door. Those are my two thoughts on that.
Any other comments or deliberation? Do we have a suggestion for action? Or are we able to ask the applicant if they want to move forward or if they want to?
Yeah, I came up to the dais early. I'm sorry. So first of all, I really hope you don't think we wasted your time because this has been very helpful. I think we should reapply. I think we should take all the feedback that we've gotten, including a new plat plan, and the square footage and very much showing what we intend to do with the numbers, with the plans, demonstrating that we do actually have an incredibly long drive space to mitigate the parking space, as well as the not putting the burden back on the city on if a door is locked or not. So I think we can easily do that. So thank you, and I hope we
Thanks.
didn't waste your time.
So I do want to be very clear here, because it does matter. So your bylaws, if the planning commission chooses to postpone because sufficient information wasn't provided and you want further information along the lines that you've discussed, you can make that motion and they could bring that back. Your bylaws state if somebody were to withdraw
And it's 1 year.
while under consideration by the planning commission at a meeting, it may not again be placed on an agenda for 12 months after the date of withdrawal. So I guess if the applicant chooses to withdraw, that's fine. That would be
That's why, because we can choose to postpone.
We need more information.
I don't think they're asking if we could request, but I will not withdraw.
Okay. That's, I was getting ready to ask you, if it's a withdrawal, then
correct
it is 12 months before it can come back.
for your bylaws.
If we postpone, can we set a date for the postponement? Can we leave it open-ended?
You-
I haven't seen.
Yeah, I mean, I would suggest probably setting a date so that way folks are aware when the discussion will continue and
We called a special meeting the last time in the December meeting so that we could let them relook at it, but I'm okay. Well, doesn't matter to me.
Right, so I just wanted, if we're gonna have a motion, do we want to have it postponed for one meeting, 2 meetings?
One meeting, my opinion, I'd make motion to postpone waiting the updated plats, the numbers, the layout of the driveway.
Can I ask
For the
the-
next planning commission meeting.
I think that's fine, except the applicant has to be able to say that, yes, we can comply.
That's what I was gonna ask. I was gonna ask, is the applicant
Oh,
okay
that's
with
true
that?
too. Yeah,
Or would they rather have a 2-month proposal? Postpone.
So moved.
Then, so the motion would be that we postpone.
CJ was
to
making.
postpone, waiting further clarifications on the existing home square footage, the ADU square footage with the delineation, and with the driveway included, showing the parking places. And to have that meeting at the May planning commission
It
meeting.
would be May
We
18th,
need to put the closing
closing of the,
off
Well,
the,
they got, and the layout, they're gonna have to show
Okay,
what they're doing
got
with it.
how would we physically verify that square footage? So we have a motion to postpone 245 Spear Street till the May 18th meeting. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
On this, we should have a roll call, right?
Yes. Anderson,
yes.
Jarrett,
Yes,
Broker,
Yes.
Vaughn,
Yes.
Bushy,
No.
and Haynes.
Yes. It carries 245 Spear Street will be moved to the May, at which time we'll have a new public hearing and a new presentation by the applicant. At this time, we welcome Commissioner Gardner back to his chair to continue with new business. The next item on our agenda is the zoning ordinance amendment. And I'm going to ask zoning administrator Ryan to kind of give an update here as to why this is in front of us and what we were being asked to review and consider for a vote this evening.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. As planning commission, I'm sure certainly recalls from last month, at your March 16th meeting, you made a recommendation to the city council related to a police powered ordinance, and you recommended they enact temporary moratorium on permitting approval and consideration of new building construction, existing building expansion and site development, and all waterfront locations in the Water Street North, Water Street South, Water Street Commercial and Resort zoning districts. On March 27th, the city council did in fact adopt the police powers ordinance just as described. And then this was published in your local newspaper on April 6th. So now that the city council has adopted a police powers ordinance and based on some recent court decisions, staff and legal counsel are recommending to the planning commission that you review and consider a corresponding zoning ordinance amendment and make a recommendation on whether to adopt that amendment to the city council. Because it's a zoning ordinance amendment, that would actually require that you hold a public hearing first. So you're being asked tonight to consider setting a public hearing on the draft corresponding zoning ordinance amendment, which is included in your packet. Your city attorney, Kyle O'Mara, is on your line today and happy to answer any more questions related to kind of this unique process, especially with some recent case law that's come down.
Who would like to speak?
Yeah, Mr. O'Mara, if you're okay with that, Mr. Chair, yeah.
Sure, absolutely. Again, Kyle O'Mara. The reason for the zoning ordinance amendment piece, so if you closely looked at this zoning ordinance amendment, it is the exact same content of the police power moratorium on the waterfront development. The reason for a zoning ordinance amendment is about 4 years or so ago, the Eastern District of Michigan, a federal court, found that for imposing a moratorium on land use issues, they believe that you should go through the zoning ordinance amendment process because you are forestalling potential consideration of land use issues. This is a little bit of a unique scenario because it's a federal court interpreting state law, which federal courts they do, but they don't do all the time. And it's state zoning law. The other interesting issue with that, or not issue with that opinion, but fact about that opinion is it is an unpublished district court opinion. So it's not precedential. It related to a wind development outside the thumb where they imposed a moratorium on wind turbines. Since that case, there has been state law cases that have continued to either find moratoriums imposed by either resolution or police power ordinance to be valid, but as a belts and suspenders approach, it's likely prudent to adopt a corresponding zoning ordinance amendment moratorium in the event that there is any potential challenge.
A question for the city attorney or zoning administrator under amending the zoning ordinance as I read it, proposals for amendments, supplements, or changes may be initiated by the city council on its own motion by the planning commission. Why are we doing this instead of having the city council do it itself? And he froze.
Yeah, so, yeah, and Kyle, you could take that. I know we discussed that language and yeah.
Do you want, I'd be happy to repeat it for.
Yeah, go ahead.
Under amendments of our zoning ordinance, it says initiation of amendments, proposal for amendments, supplements, or changes may be initiated by the city council on its own motion by the planning commission. Why are we doing this instead of the city council doing it on its own motion?
Initiating the zoning ordinance amendment process by its own motion. So I think the provision you just read does allow the planning commission to initiate zoning ordinance amendments if it so chooses. If the question is related to why would you do a police power or moratorium first, it becomes enacted much quicker.
Why is it, I'm sorry, why is it coming to us at all rather than just the city council taking care of it directly?
Oh, that's okay. That's a good question because the planning commission does have to hold a public hearing on any zoning ordinance amendment. And the reason I believe it came to the planning commission first is so you could set a public hearing date.
So the city council would not be holding a public hearing.
That is correct. The way the Michigan Zoning Enabling Act works for zoning ordinance amendments is the planning commission holds a public hearing on the zoning ordinance amendment. Then the planning commission makes a recommendation to city council for adoption of the zoning ordinance amendment.
I haven't gotten to that part of the training yet. Thank you.
No, that's okay. And I appreciate the question. Sorry for the little bit of the confusion.
No, it's a good question and it's exactly, yeah, we went through that. scenario. So,
Okay,
yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, Chairman Mans, thanks. And thank you, Commissioner Lachey. That's a great question because when I first read this, when we got the packet, I was like, wait a minute, didn't we already do this?
Mhm.
And after hearing that explanation, that question, thank you again for asking it, is that my concern is there another, though I have not heard any opposition to this, to the police action that the council took.
Mhm.
Does this open it up for a potential reversal of, or would we, because I think there's a general sense this is what we need to do. But does this open the door for this to be brought back to council for that's kind of where I'm.
Well, it will. I mean, ultimately you'll hold a public hearing, you'll make a recommendation on also adopting this or not, and then they'll take up that recommendation. And I guess if the council felt they wanted to go in a different direction at that time of the moratorium, they could. That's possible.
The moratorium would still be in place. It's just that you would not have an amendment to the zoning. Like this was actually would be something that we were talking about. It would go into here's the zoning
Right.
amendment that reinforces the moratorium, and it falls off, as I understand it, by putting the date in as the September 30, after that date or whenever the moratorium or this review is over, then the zoning would revert back to what it was previously.
Right. And I read that in the notes that were
Right.
prepared for us. So I guess to answer ask the question that was actually, I think you just made, is that what if we didn't do anything? If the police powers already, the moratorium's in place. What is compelling us to change the zoning?
I think with the city attorney,
Is it-
well, I'll let him, maybe, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I think what I heard from him is essentially that because of that court case 4 years ago, there's been some challenges, it sounds like, that have been
Okay.
raised. And so this is an extra piece that you can consider to make it more defensible.
Because if an applicant came in and said, hey, we're meeting all the zoning requirements, I'm challenging your moratorium. If the
Okay.
zoning is amended and someone comes before us, they're not technically meeting the zoning requirements any longer because the zoning has been amended. And then the moratorium really wouldn't even be necessary at that point, but we have the moratorium in place first before we would recommend a zoning change.
Yeah.
This is the planning commission work we should have done last month is what I'm seeing it as.
That's what I'm
Here,
thinking.
if I may have some additional context that I think may be helpful to explain why the process has been recommended in this way, and essentially maybe to simplify why you would want to do both a police power ordinance as well as a zoning ordinance amendment for a moratorium, if that's okay.
Please.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead, please.
So why you do this way, this is how we have been recommending to impose moratoriums, is essentially authoritative case law in Michigan will say that you can impose a moratorium through police power ordinance. That is exactly what the city has done, and a police power moratorium can be effective much earlier, much sooner than a zoning ordinance amendment. They both govern the same thing. The zoning ordinance amendment requires the public hearing, and it then eventually requires approval by city council. There's extra steps. The reason why you'd want to do both is for the off chance that someone were to challenge the validity of the police power moratorium based on that court decision that occurred in a federal court in 2018, which said you can't impose a moratorium by police power ordinance because you are regulating a land use issue and it's a disguised zoning ordinance and you didn't follow the zoning ordinance adoption procedures. There's a variety of case law that, especially state case law, and I would suspect federal case law as well, that disagrees with that decision in the Eastern District of Michigan, the district court in Michigan. But to completely defend the city from a formation challenge of the moratorium that you have imposed, we have recommended to adopt this zoning ordinance amendment, which, like the chair said, would fall off either at the expiration of the moratorium date, or if you adopted new regulations governing the conduct at issue in the moratorium ordinance. So it's essentially, it's purposeful to use it to utilize the police power process first and then almost bolster the police power moratorium by a zoning ordinance amendment moratorium, which may or may not be necessary. In my opinion, it is not necessary, but you don't want to chance it. You don't want to just, leave yourself open.
And all it really requires is that we hold a public hearing and recommend it to council, and then it's up to council.
Especially
Correct.
since we now telegraph this to anybody who might be interested in challenging this. We have laid them out exactly how to do it.
Well, any good attorney would already know, Mr. Lachey, that, so.
Is there any additional discussion? If not, do we have a motion?
I would make a motion to set a public hearing on May 18th, 2023 for zoning ordinance amendment for a temporary waterfront commercial development and construction moratorium.
Do we have a second?
I'll second that motion.
Motion by Gardner. Second by Ann. Oh, I'm sorry. I use too many first names, but she's got it.
Was that the right motion, or were we supposed to, at the end of it, did we need to specify if it was for a zoning amendment? I just want to be sure the motion is,
He did.
It says
he said
zoning ordinance
got
amendment.
it, okay.
I feel like I'm
That
back
would
in
be
law
a-
class.
A roll call. I will ask the clerk.
Anderson,
Yes,
Jared,
Here, yes.
Roker,
Yes.
Gardner,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
Lachey.
Yes.
and Haynes.
Yes.
I know, that's teachers calling us.
So noted, we will
it's all good.
have a public hearing on May 18th during our planning session, 7 PM. Next new business item was the plan and the timeline for the waterfront development zoning ordinance review. I know zoning administrator Ryan and our legal have put together a memo that's been included in our kit. It kind of walks us through the waterfront project and the timeline that we would like to potentially follow. Ryan, do you want to kind of kick it off and walk them through?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just gonna quickly introduce, I believe most of you have met David Jurasik. He's our consulting planner that we work with, or I work with on a very regular basis. He will be assisting you with reviewing your waterfront ordinances. So he's kind of laid out potential path to do that, but he's here to kind of discuss that proposed path with you tonight and get your feedback and take it from there. So I'll turn it over to Dave, if that's okay, Mr. Chair.
Please, David, please take it.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Mr. Chair, Planning Commission members. I'm David Drossick from Horizon Community Planning. And I apologize I can't be there tonight. I would have preferred to be there in person to kick off this project, but I'm glad at least we can do this virtually. So based on the concerns that sparked the moratorium for waterfront development, we're moving forward with a waterfront regulation project. So the map in the packet shows the focus area, which includes the waterfront locations in the Water Street North, Water Street South, Water Street Commercial, and the resort zoning districts. So over the next 5 months, our goal is to assess the land use regulations applicable to the area of focus and to update the zoning ordinance to create a more comprehensive set of riverfront waterfront development regulations. So this memo proposes a 3-phase project, including a comprehensive assessment phase, a public involvement phase, and then lastly, recommendations and zoning updates concerning creation of a new zoning district, an overlay district, or updating the existing zoning districts. So the objective tonight is to really achieve a general consensus on the scope and timeline of this project. And we'd also like to get your general feedback on the public input process. So just to quickly go through the 3 steps, the first being the comprehensive assessment. So we've already started this. So this is going to be April, May, and finalized in June. So I hope to present that to you at your June Planning Commission meeting. Really 4 parts of that first phase is to first do a character assessment. We want to understand the range of uses, the building types, how buildings are placed on sites, architecture, parking, streetscape, pedestrian accommodations, really get a good character assessment of these areas within the area of study. The next would be to do an assessment of the development and redevelopment potential of the area, the properties within the area of focus, area of study. There are going to be certain areas that have recently developed that probably will stay that way. There's going to be areas that maybe have aged buildings that could have a good potential for redevelopment. And then there could be either parking areas or greenfields that could be developed from the onset. So after that, then we want to look at the zoning ordinance itself. Your zoning ordinance, we want to make sure that we understand the type of development and the type of buildings that could be built by right or through special land use under the current zoning regulations. So the questions we want to ask, that I noted in the report, we want to know that if something develops, is it going to implement the city's vision for this area and your master plan? And will it result in development that is desirable and that meets really your objectives for the area? So we want to understand what the zoning ordinance allows and could allow on the property within this area. Then lastly, within phase one is to review best practices from other similarly situated riverfront or lakefront communities, and especially those with boardwalks or public access to waterfront. And so what we'll do is do kind of a best practice analysis of other communities and really I see what types of regulations can be adapted and applied to your area of focus. So then the next phase would be our public involvement process. And I'd really like to discuss this over the next 2 months or so, and then finalize our plan in June so that we can implement it in late June and July. So some of the ideas that we pose in this staff report would be a community survey. We could also do a visual preference exercise to get a good idea from the general public what types of buildings or site layouts that they would prefer to see. And lastly, really an open house or a workshop that we could have interactive stations on a number of topics that relate to waterfront development. So if we did that, we'd certainly rely on the Planning Commission members to help staff those stations and to solicit that public input. And then lastly, the phase three, this is a tight time frame over these next 5 months. So we have a lot to do in a short amount of time. But what we would probably do is have working drafts available toward the end of July. We probably want to have a public hearing in August and then send this to the city council in September to meet that September 30th deadline. The moratorium as it reads does allow for an extension. We're going to move forward with this with every intent to meet that September 30th deadline. But things do happen, and you may want to involve the public more, have additional meetings, so that that could add some time. But we are going to strive to meet that September 30th moratorium expiration. So again, as I mentioned earlier, we'd like to get your general thoughts on the scope that's proposed in the memo, and then get your general feedback on the types of public inputs methods that we can incorporate, and to what extent you want to hear from the public on this matter.
Yeah, Chairman Mans, thank you. David, good to see you. Worked with you in the past. I can personally speak from experience with David and his firm. They do fantastic work and can speak highly of their efforts. David, the presentation that was put in the packet is spot on from my perspective. I think this is exactly what I had expected to see in terms of how we're going to approach this. It is an aggressive schedule, and I immediately thought we'll know pretty quickly if we need to go back and say, do we need another month or two, which I think the council would be amenable to. In terms of the public input, I appreciate the emphasis that I heard in your presentation on this. And I think about the waterfront, which I live very near. There are, at least by my head count, 3 public places in which we could have people walk to on the waterfront to see presentations or to see some of the displays you're talking about. The time of the year should be great. I mean, it's get people down there and actually see some of the concerns that people are having and the reason why this moratorium is being put into place. So I think the effort to get out, get in the public, not have it in some meeting room at City Hall or something, I think really is going to be beneficial to this, as well as making sure that we get people who not everybody's on social media, not everybody has an email account. And there's a number of people that live near the waterfront that I personally know that wouldn't know this is even going on if I didn't talk with them about it. So any effort to get people involved and hearing about this and getting them involved in the process, I'm fully on board with. So I really appreciate this. The only other question, I didn't see any numbers in this in terms of what we expect the total cost might be for the city for the engagement. Do we know that yet?
Yeah, so it was like a lump sum total that estimate that Dave's provided to me to assist with our budget planning. Like,
Mhm.
as we discussed with the council, there's plenty of dollars in that ordinance review through the end of June. There'll probably be some left over, to be quite frank, so we have a couple months left. And then staff through the budget kind of presented dollars to support his work as well as McKenna's work on the short-term rental task force going forward. So.
Yeah.
Yep.
We have a approximate amount what that might look like, just a kind of an estimate
Yeah, so
ballpark.
this project's probably 20 to 25,000 is what Dave's put it at.
Right.
Yep.
Thank you.
So.
Other commission members that have thoughts or comments?
I have a question. Was there any consideration given to having the other side of Water Street included in the project review? It's not right waterfront, but if you sit across from Wicks Park, I just wonder if it was considered.
So let's say, so the resort district, which is a commercial district, is included in this project review. So
And-
that yellow portion that's on your map there,
Talking about the east side of Water Street.
oh, the east
Correct.
side, I'm sorry.
I was going to say east side, but Water Street bends and then it becomes the north side of Water.
I
Street.
apologize.
East side,
Okay.
North side of Water Street, yes.
Gotcha.
What's designated green, which is Water
Good,
Street
okay.
East.
Yep. I apologize. I
I'm just saying
misunderstood
that.
your
No problem.
question.
No,
Yep.
I wasn't clear.
Right.
So, yeah, one of our council members did mention during, when we were discussing the moratorium, whether or not we should take a broader look at our overall number of districts, including across the street from this particular area. I understand from the charge from the planning commission and the council is that waterfront was more of the focus in that land area. So that's kind of what the path that we've embarked upon.
Okay, it just strikes me that, okay. I get this,
Mhm.
but I also wonder if, if it's about waterfront development. Okay, never mind. Okay.
Yeah, I think there's definitely considerations to be made about what's across the street as well and its relationship to how close it is to the water. Certainly, that will probably be coming up in some of these discussions.
I doubt we're
Yeah.
going to vacate any Water Street pieces so that somebody could
Sorry.
develop both sides of Water Street or something. So, okay, no problem.
And I know during some of those conversations, it was being discussed, should we look at all of our districts and do we have too many districts and should they be redefined? And that seemed to be a very large project. And so when if you recall, when we were prioritizing for 2023, we prioritized short-term rental and the waterfront. Yes, in some ways it would make sense if we could say, okay, well, let's make the waterfront both sides of Water Street, but that would require zoning changes and amendments that would have to be approved first. And then you'd have to go forth with the moratorium. So that's kind of was the rationale of just doing the waterfront also. Was we're not ready to tackle the bigger picture.
And I might add that we may be learning a lot about the districts and the number of districts as we go through the short-term rental planning process.
And I think we've mentioned before, a lot of this also overlaps with the master plan that will be coming up, which I know, Bobby is.
Haven't you
Agreed
finished that
to-
yet, Bobby?
And it's something that, many of these topics that we're currently doing will overlap and lead into, how we will formulate the master plan update.
Hey, can I give a quick suggestion? As they're looking, even though it's not technically in that zone, just from a thought space, assuming that we do rethink the zones at some point, just keeping in mind how that might impact the other side of the street. I mean, I think,
That's exactly.
In renderings.
Very much what I.
and
was
just
looking
sort of
for.
so that we have that in the back of our heads as we,
And if they're doing renderings for the public opinion, maybe they kind of have renderings of what we would think could be, across the street based upon what's currently allowed. I think that would be beneficial. David, you did ask in our packet if we had suggestions of cities that you may want to take a look at. And when I was going back and
Yes,
doing
please.
a little research, I don't know if you've kind of chosen some of the cities that you want to review, but I know in 21 and 22, Grand Haven did a waterfront development plan. And it was pretty extensive. It's a lot of what you're talking about yourself, involving the public, and they came out with the plan. And then Ludington did a Greater Ludington Waterfront Master Plan. It was a subset of their overall master plan just for the waterfront. And I've reviewed both of those. They're like, each of them are like 50 some pages. But I was just, since you asked if we had suggestions of communities that you might want to take a look at, within Michigan, I wanted to throw at least those two out as two that you might want to take a look at.
Chairman Mans, thank you for mentioning that. I think where I go on these projects is what we don't want it to look like. And so there's a number of waterfront communities in Michigan that are examples of what we don't want to become. I've got a long enough memory here that I can remember the waterfront being very different than it is today. I can remember commercial fisheries down on the waterfront. I can remember where Wicks Park used to be Anchor Park, which is where the Star, which was then the Queen of Saugatuck used to be. There's a miniature golf course. So I've got memories of the laundromat used to be right in the parking lot next to Wicks Park. So my memories of Saugatuck are different than what a lot of folks are. But what is the most important thing is that it was always accessible. You could always see the water. You could walk down, you could sit, you can enjoy boats going by. You can enjoy the views, and that's what people still come for, even though it may not look like what I remember it. What I can still enjoy about it is still there. So I think that's the guiding principle for me, is to make sure that any development that occurs in respect of that.
Absolutely.
Be able to walk from Coughlin to Wicks Park.
Yeah, that's
And-
that's it. Thank
That's
you.
Totally what we're hoping that we'll see towards the end. Now, I think at this point, we don't need to have any type of a motion. David, you were just kind of looking for us to be in agreement with the timeline, or?
Yeah, and I think he was hoping for some feedback. It sounds like on, if you had any initial thoughts on like public engagement strategies. Mr. Gardner mentioned, maybe like a walking tour or something like that with community members, but I'm sure Dave would love any other ideas that you have. It may take some time to think about. That's okay too, so.
Yeah, and we can kind of come back. One thing you did ask, David, and I'll speak for myself, as part of the planning commission, that when it does come time to have the public outreach, if we were manning booths or being in the park to try to, assist in that outreach portion of it, I would gladly volunteer. And I'm guessing most of the commission members here, we'll definitely give you that support. I think, the idea is like we were talking about on the task force, if there is some type of surveys that we can get in advance that would kind of help us in hearing what the citizens want. So when you're putting the renderings together, that you've got some input already, as opposed to, just kind of bringing in what we think, our potential could be, can that be done during the 2 months so that we can have the survey and still be ready for the July or August, public? That's going to be kind of the question. But if we can, we can kind of overlap the review of where we are with the preparation of maybe a survey or the first outreach to the public, and then have the actual public sessions. And I fully agree with all the comments here, especially, Commissioner Gardner, who, was talking about the importance of getting the public involvement and getting it someplace other than a conference room or like the city hall.
And not that my father-in-law would do this, but he uses the boat launch just about daily during the summertime for his kayak. And maybe we can get him to man a little information station just to kind of get his impression of his use of the waterfront. Yeah, he's an active user.
Very good.
Don't tell Charlie I said that, though.
I'd be happy to man the west side of the river, and I have
Yeah.
a feeling we could get Jane to join as well.
I'll definitely take the west side. It's easy.
Okay.
With that, I think we have consensus that we're all in favor of kind of the timeline that's been laid out. So David, I guess the question would be, so then for May, what would we anticipate to have on the agenda? A review of
I would,
what could be?
yes, for May, I think we should continue the conversation on the public input during May. Because, I'll be working behind the scenes for the next couple of weeks on the full assessments, the character study, in the best practices and so on. So I have a lot of work behind the scenes. So I think the best thing to do would really start to solidify that civic engagement plan so that we're ready to go in, late June or, through July.
Okay.
And I do agree, it may even be a good idea. I think it was mentioned that we can actually get a survey out earlier in the process and then put a little bit more time and effort into the planning of the on-site workshops, in the visual preference survey and things like that. So we could always implement the community survey early in the process, maybe even within the next month or so.
Would be great.
I think that'd be
But we
actually-
certainly want the planning commission to review the questions on that survey. So maybe that's something I could shoot for next month.
That'd be great, because I really do think that the survey gets the whole thing started. And then when we do bring stuff to the
Yeah.
public sessions, it's in reaction to what we heard in the surveys.
Yeah,
Thanks,
Chairman
Chairman.
Mans, and I just would like to emphasize that there are a number of residents in town that are not on email, they're not on social media. We need to make sure that when the surveys are done, which I'm fully supportive of, that we engage those people in some form or fashion in the survey, whether it's a knock on the door, whatever it may be. I want to make sure those people get included in conversations.
Yeah, because I'm wondering, can we have a survey that's mailed on our website as well as our email list?
Yeah, I think
Would
you
be
want
my
to just
suggestion.
touch.
Mhm.
Yeah, touch all the ways
Very
that
good.
people pen and, pencil and paper, online, QR codes. I mean, just think of all the different ways people get it and.
If they're not online or social media, tell they know the QR
No,
code.
they'll get a mailing at their home and they can fill it out by hand.
David, thank you.
I don't know.
And we look forward to
Nice work,
continuing
David.
this. Thank you for that presentation, because
Actually, even though, I'm sorry,
Thank
even
you.
though I'm sort of laughing about it. Doing inserts in the commercial record.
is a
paper
great
inserts
idea.
It's a great, I don't know who had the idea, but it's a great idea.
Like the actual survey.
Actual survey inserted in the commercial record.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
Drop it off city hall.
Yeah. Yeah, any way that we can try to get it out to the public. That'd be, so I think those are all good ideas, and we'll come with some of the, I guess, if I could ask myself as well as the rest of the commission members, by the time we come in May, try to be thinking of questions that you think would be appropriate. And then David, if you come with kind of a sample, if you're doing some of the research on what other cities, that have the beautiful waterfronts protected, if they've done similar type of surveys that you could also, share with us, and then we could try to create something that would be approved by all of us at the May meeting that we could then be putting out, hopefully following that meeting.
Yeah, that sounds like a great plan.
Thank you.
Good work, David. Thank you.
Thank you.
That concludes new business for this evening. Communications, I do not have anything other than the letter that zoning administrator Brian had already went through regarding the positive comments for the 245 Spear Street. And that's the only communication that we received.
Correct. Yep.
Which is not really part of this. Report of officers, we have the zoning administrator's activity report. It's been included in the packet. I'm sure many of us have had a chance to, review it. Any questions for Brian?
Has the flow of short-term rental applications abated a bit, or does it continue to?
Yeah, they've abated in the sense that, the number of them coming in has slowed down. Getting a lot of calls still about them. What are the status of things? Folks still have an interest in potentially still maybe, getting a short-term rental certificate. Yep.
Mhm. Because the last couple of reports, I think, if I counted the number of short-term rental, between applications and reapplications
Yep.
and certifying, and it's numbered over 40 in the last couple of reports. And
Yep.
some of them may be the same.
Yeah, a lot of them are the same. A lot of them are like pending fire department inspections. Some of them have some other zoning issues that we've been working through. Or I'm waiting further information to have it be a complete application to actually process it. So a lot of them on this next report, you'll see the city council will be quite similar. And then some of them were able to actually kind of move along because they've been approved. So.
But as we've said in the past, I think that report is great. We kind of like look through it.
Really helpful.
It
Yes, it is.
makes me wonder sometimes how you have time for the phone calls that all of us make to you. So thank you to Sarah, the entire Jamie, the full staff. Also underneath the reports was the ZBA training and Ryan.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I just wanted to, the zoning board of appeals is going to be meeting on May 18th from 3:30 to 6:30. It's actually right before your planning commission meeting. Double check the time frame on that. Yes. 3:30 to 6:30. So we have ZBA. So it's scheduled for our ZBA members, but it's an open meeting available to anybody. In fact, we've invited the Saugatuck Township and Douglas Zoning Board of Appeals members. So I know at least a few will be joining us from Saugatuck Township. Don't quite have the numbers yet from Douglas. So kind of a tri-community efforts to share some training opportunities. But you're all welcome to attend as much or as little of it as you wish as well. There's certainly crossover and what will be covered. Our city attorney, Chris Patterson, will actually be conducting the training. So if there's any particular topics or questions that you might have that you think would be good to have in the training, we're all ears for that. And then we're actually working with Saugatuck Township. They're taking on scheduling a site plan review training through the Michigan Association of Planning to have that local and in person. We're still trying to, I think I have an email waiting that I need to read from him on a potential. Well, I think he was still working on the date on that. So, so stay tuned. We're looking at, I think, June for that. But that would be a great opportunity in person to kind of have some training on site plan reviews.
And that's also about a 3-hour.
Yeah, it's a lengthier training. Yeah, yep.
And so it's,
Might-
I
It
think,
might need to be 8 hours for me, but
Well, that's all right. That's all right.
but it is a, just based upon the things we were going through, this evening, I think we've all kind of had that in some of our
that'd be great.
updates, but having that additional training. The one thing on the May 18th, and I would have to ask task force, short-term rental task force chair Anderson, our meetings are scheduled for the first and third from 3 to 5.
Right.
First and third Thursdays, which the third one would be May 18th.
Yeah, so we talked about that today with McKenna. I think what we'll need to do is either look at maybe, and we have to talk obviously with the task force, moving the task force meeting earlier in the day before the ZBA training, or potentially looking at another day. So,
ZBA training was set before the task force, so I apologize for the conflict there, but yeah.
I just want to make sure that we were aware
yep.
and
Mhm.
whether we will be up for having, meetings every 2 weeks right off from the start. I don't know that answer yet.
Yeah, and it may be that we can push it out a week. I think we know we need to figure that out and we just
Okay.
haven't done that yet.
Very good.
When you have, I'm sorry, when you have community forums with respect to the short-term rental task force, will those be in the evenings?
I think we need to have a mix. I think we need to kind of stagger over a few weeks. So if people are out of town, they don't miss the only one, and have them at different times of day is my thinking, just so we catch people when they're available. I think the more we can find opportunities where people can participate, the better.
Yeah, no, I absolutely thought you would have more than one. I just was thinking that, still some people in this town work during the day.
Right. No, I think
And-
for sure. I mean, we definitely need to have evenings, and maybe we need to have weekends. And I think we need to make sure that we're making it as broad and accessible for as many people.
And I do think that's one of the things will be on the
Yep.
agenda for the task force, just like David had tonight, for us to all kind of hear and agree. You're asking all of them, for their input and commitment towards the public sessions. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes.
Next, we have the second round of public comments. At this time, if there's anyone who would like to address us about any topic, that you can come up and state your name and your address and limit it to 3 minutes. And we welcome our first speaker.
Yeah, Mark Klungel, 747 Water Street.
Absolutely, Mark.
I
Welcome.
want to comment on the waterfront study and say thank you for getting going. The one thing I would have to say, and years ago, we used to have all buildings, all development had to have parking. City council took that out over the years. Then all B&Bs had to have parking for every room they rented. City council took that out a few years ago, that they only have to have 50% parking for their rentals. When you're looking at this, I'm hoping that we consider parking. It's one of the things that happens, anybody can open a business in this town and bring in lots of people and not provide any parking. We see it every day. And I have been in front of council talking about parking
Right.
over the last 10 years, over and over. And I watched it decrease. I watched it take it away. And, that square footage they put up never includes parking. So that's my point on that. Thank you for listening on that part. The other part I have that I still find unusual over the weeks that I've watched, like this zoning ordinance amendment. And like Mark said, why is it here? I watched the moratorium come here and say, why is it here? Moratorium on the waterfront, moratorium on rentals. I mean, and I watched this group analyze and look at everything on a couple building a house, and you had, I think, an hour discussion on that, trying to build a house up in the old Presbyterian camp. Yet when these things come in from, I think it's from council, they want you just to rubber stamp them. It appears, because you don't really dig into them and say, why is it? What are we doing? You just kind of rubber stamp it so that they say, planning past it. I'm questioning why not? When I look at the moratorium on, say, vacation rentals, you were putting fire inspections off for another year. No one talked to the fire department. No one considered them. That's a public safety issue. Nobody discussed it here. So I'm just saying, thank you for your effort, but take a look at this stuff rather than rubber stamping it, because you're being asked to rubber stamp things. And I'm questioning, take a look at it closer. Thank you for listening.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Mark.
Thank you.
And we appreciate those comments. Do we have any other member of the public here or online? If you're online, please just give us notification by raising your hand or unmuting yourself. Seeing none, we will close the second public comment. Before we move to adjournment, I ask if there's any comments of fellow commissioners that we would like to.
I have one. Do you have one?
No, go, please, you go first.
You can go first.
Oh, thank you. I just want to say that I appreciated being a applicant in the audience as opposed to sitting at the table. It was a learning experience for me. So I just want to say that thank you for the discussion and the questions. It was, again, as a planning commissioner, I learned some things this evening, and every meeting I go to, if I can walk away and say I learned something new, it was a productive meeting, and tonight was productive. Thank you very much. And we will be seeing you on May 18th. Well, I'll be seeing you on May 18th anyway, but learning experience. And again, I'm very humbled to be a part of this group, and I appreciate the expertise and the thoughts and the questions. Thank you.
Russ, I appreciate that, because I know that as a, speaking for myself, it's difficult to try to say, hey, we want all these additional things, but I think it's kind of a learning for everyone. So I appreciate your comment on that.
Great.
Mr. Anderson.
Yeah, I'd like to make a brief comment related to the discussions about the proposed moratorium on short-term rental license and the use of the word nefarious, which means, according to Oxford, wicked or criminal or evil. At the March 22 City Council workshop, Planning Commissioner and Councilmember Gardner insinuated that there was something nefarious about how the proposal was brought before the Planning Commission. In other words, he implied that the mayor, Planning Commission chair, city manager, and or planning and zoning director might have engaged in criminal or evil behavior. Russ told me that he chose the word nefarious purposefully. There's so many things that are wrong with lobbing a false and inflammatory remark like that over the fence, and I won't name them all. But I do want to go on record to say that behavior like this is toxic to city council, to the planning commission, and importantly, to city staff. Especially in this moment of public life, toxic words and behaviors fuel false narratives, erode the collaborative spirit we need for wise and fair government, and it undermines our talented, hardworking, and dedicated staff. We're all stewards to the city of Saugatuck, and I think we need to be better and do better. Thank you.
Thank you.
Here.
I was at that meeting and I've always considered your representation, whether on commission or council, to be straightforward and to be sincere and to be honest. And I was sitting right over there and it was one of those moments that I can't remember, it might have been Holly who was sitting beside me, I'm not sure. But when you use the word nefarious, I said he lost me at nefarious. And I'm really sorry to say that, especially in this day and age. So thank you, Holly.
Any other commission? No, just any closing comments?
Nope.
I think it's a productive meeting. I think we all learn a lot every time we come in to these. I look forward to the proposal coming back in front of us, the public hearing on the 18th for the Spear Street, public hearing for the waterfront development. And for each of us kind of thinking about how we'd like to see survey questions or any input we can give to David. So I think it's been a good evening and I'm glad I made it back for it. With that, we're going to ask if anyone would like to make a motion to adjourn.
Support?
All those in favor? Yes.
Aye.
Yes.
Here.